Welcome back to God Jack Joan, the home of epic adventures, powerful heroes, and stories. We will see third part. What if Harry, Hermione and Luna went back in time? Here is short summary. What if Harry, Hermione, and Luna were given one final chance to rewrite history? After Voldemort turns Britain into a nightmare, the three friends travel back in time to stop the Dark Lord before his rise to power. Armed with knowledge of the future, they outsmart enemies, expose hidden secrets, and change the fate of the wizarding world forever. But changing history comes at a dangerous price, and not everyone can be trusted. Before we begin, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another adventure. Now, grab your wand, prepare for the unexpected, and let's dive into today's story. Well, bugger, Harry muttered as he put down the omnioculars. Pack it up, loves, this is a no-go. Hermione crept forwards and crouched next to him, the long GR of the hill they were stationed on blocking them from the sight of the people inside the house. So Dobby was right, the Bulstrodes have a couple of other Death Eaters with them. Oh, I'm sure he was right, but there aren't 2 extra people there anymore. There are 7 thanks to all the knots. That's irritating, Luna commented from behind them. That it is. I had hoped that after the Carrows misadventure, they'd safety in numbers didn't apply here, but it looks like they instead made the right call and decided there simply wasn't enough backup. So what are we going to do? The brunette asked. Winky noted the same thing about the Crobs. What's to say the rest haven't done this, too? We're good, but I don't want to try laying siege to a warded house with 9 combatants lurking around inside. He shook his head. No, that would just be plain suicidal. Maybe we can attack at night, like we did at the Knots place. We could, Luna allowed, but I'd feel better if we had him or Winky do surveillance tonight to make sure they aren't emulating the Carrows and sleeping in shifts. If they are, it'd be just as dangerous to attack at night as in the daylight. Of course, if they aren't, we'd have to use a time turner to go back long enough for us to get a full night's sleep. Either way, there's nothing we can do here and now. Let's go. Tucking the binoculars back into the pouch on his belt, he spun on his heel and felt himself be squeezed through a too-tight tube before appearing in the refurbished study of Potter Manor. 2 sharp cracks heralded his lover's arrival. He did not bother looking at them at the moment, though, instead focusing his attention on the enlarged map of Britain hung on one wall. Scattered across the L and M were push pins correlating to the location of their future targets, each one connected by red string to a sheaf of paper and parchment tacked on the outer edges of the map. These ordered documents were the results of Dobby and Winky's periods of reconnaissance, the number of people present at their target's location, types of wards, further descriptions and arithmetic analyses of which were later added by Hermione and Luna, internal layouts when the elves could make them out, the residents' weekly schedules, and anything else the trio could think of that they felt could be helpful. Not for the first time, Harry was a little unnerved by just how much research they had done on these people. In addition to burglary and larceny, he was quite sure they had broken a few laws on stalking and invasion of privacy, too. Oh, well, if they didn't want us to spend so much time finding a way to get to them, they shouldn't have engaged in torture and murder. What goes around, comes around, and all that. His partner sidled up beside him and stared at the map for a moment. I say we just burn them all out. They've nowhere to hide if their houses are ash and ciders. Luna, Hermione, she retorted with a broad grin. Come on, it isn't like we haven't made enough money already. Where are we? 400,000 galleons. Closer to 4, what with emptying their Gringotts accounts and pawning off all their belongings, he admitted. To be honest, they spent more time selling their accumulated possessions than they did procuring them. They had a bad habit of filling their pouches with everything that was not nailed down, and sometimes even a few things that were, and they did not have a reason or the space to keep all of it. With glamours to allow them to visit the same shops multiple times in a row without arousing suspicion, offloading their ill-gotten gains wasn't difficult, per se, but there was just so much of it that they could not drop it all off at one place. They had made it a habit to visit what felt like every pawnbroker in England, Scotland, and Wales, and they still had stockpiles of stolen junk lying around. See, we don't need any more gold. Bloody hell, we have enough that we could live off of it for the rest of our lives and still be able to give each of our kids a hefty inheritance. At this point in the game, The rewards are rapidly being outweighed by the risks, Luna concluded. Hermione raised a pair of fingers. Two things. First, we technically don't have 400,000 in the bank. I converted about 50 grand to cash and had Dad invest it, so we're down a little gold and up a lot of pounds sterling. Second, you'll have a hard time burning the Death Eaters out of their holes. They all have fireproof enchantments on their properties, remember? They paused for a long moment. Oh, right, that would make things more difficult. Though he had kept an eye and ear on the girls back and forth, most of Harry's thoughts involved how to get around this newest hurdle. Suddenly, inspiration struck. That could work. What was that? The brunette asked. What could work where? One way to potentially deal with the more concentrated firepower. Dobby. Yes, Master Harry, Dobby said as he popped into the room. Harry indicated the map. You and Winky did an excellent job getting us all this information. The elf swelled with pride at the praise. But unfortunately, the Death Eaters caught onto our strategy and have moved more people into the houses we haven't hit yet. I need you two to go and get a more recent headcount. Take Floppy with you if you need another pair of eyes. Check each property twice a day if you can, noon and dinner, and take note if they change out who's where. We'll look over your results next week. When the elf snapped his fingers and disappeared, Luna asked, Are you going to explain just what all that was about? I thought it was fairly obvious, he replied, a wide smile making its way onto his face. I just recalled that I was made an offer we could take advantage of. By the way, do you still have that book? Thunder rumbled overhead, and Hermione glanced up from her breakfast to again check the sky as seen through the great hall ceiling. All three of the trio had herbology that Thursday, Luna for first period, and she and Harry for fourth, and it looked like the storm overhead would not be moving on until after the day's clees were done. She sighed. Drowning on her way to and from the greenhouses was not how she wanted to spend the afternoon. Due to the downpour, most of the owls were hiding in the Ollery rather than work as couriers, so it was a bit of a surprise to see one of the very few flapping over the emboldened student's head in her direction. It dropped heavily in front of Luna and shook like a dog to dry itself. Poor thing, who would be so mean as to send you out in this weather? The cooed as she untied the letter the bird was carrying. Tearing the envelope open and reading the letter enclosed, she continued, This had better be, what? That's not. Oh, Daddy. What is it? Hermione asked, beginning to worry as her girlfriend's face grew progressively paler. Your dad's not hurt, is he? No, he's fine. The rest of town, though, maybe not so much. Luna nibbled on her lip for a moment before asking, Do you recall the cuttlepuss you two saw this summer? From his place beside her, Harry shuddered. Do you mean the crime against nature and all that's decent in this world that you had trapped in your basement? Hermione winced as the memory threatened to rear its ugly head. The creature, monster, thing was terrifying in the most visceral sense, just so inherently wrong that a brief glance had caused her to have nightmares for 3 nights straight. Yes, that one. Apparently it might have, maybe, possibly, gotten loose. Harry gaped in disbelief, and she was not in much better shape. I'm sorry, could you repeat that, please? I could have sworn you said there's an eldritch abomination running loose around Ottery Street. Catchpole, yes. What I'd like to know is how the damn thing got out in the first place, he muttered. Luna blushed. Well, according to Daddy, he spent last night visiting an old friend of his who only recently re-entered the country. He didn't come out and say it, but I'm pretty sure he spent the night with her, and when he went back home, he noticed the front door was smashed apart. At first he thought it was Death Eaters, but all the debris was outside our house, and the only other damage on the ground floor was to the trapdoor. All the bear traps we had set up had gone off, and the room we kept the cuttlepuss inside was empty, so now Daddy's trying to figure out where it went and wrote to say that he wouldn't mind me, and you too if you want, going back home for a bit to help. We could do that, right? No offense to you or Zeno, love, but I'm really not seeing a reason we need to take care of this ourselves, Harry commented. Call in the regulation of magical creatures to recapture the thing. That'd be easier than us worrying about it. Ah, yes, well, the youngest of the trio looked down at the table and muttered, We kind of can't do that. And why, pray tell, is that? Luna looked up at her question. Because Josephine Whately, the friend Daddy got the cuttlepuss from in the first place, has been a persona non grata in Britain ever since she was caught arranging the sale of a breeding pair of albino penguins a few years back. If they found out that he's in contact with her and that she's whom it belongs to, they'd label it a dark creature and then arrest him for keeping it. Not that anyone with any sense couldn't tell it's a dark creature all on his own, Harry muttered. How bad would things be if we didn't get involved and it took him a while longer to find the thing? Luna handed Zeno's letter over. Let's see. Special wards in place, psychic emanations, night terrors, longer exposure leads to insanity and homicidal mania. His eyes shot up to stare at Luna. And you were keeping it in your house. Daddy knows what he's doing with creature-related wards, and we only learned about what all it could do during the Christmas holidays, the huffed. He turned back to the letter. Carnivorous, predatory, main prey theorized to be humans, because why not, implicated in the disappearance of hikers who entered their territory. No, this thing most certainly needs to be studied and protected. Luna, I know, your dad has a problem with the ministry, but in this instance I think they have a very valid point. This Whately woman sounds like a menace, and this thing is way too dangerous to be studying close to a town. Or near any living thing, really. All the more reason for us to take care of it quickly, don't you think? Luna glanced at Harry and Hermione for a few seconds. Please, I know Daddy agreeing to this was a bad idea in hindsight, but that doesn't do anything about the problem we have right now. The eldest of their little family grimaced as she weighed their available options, few of them that there were. How long is it supposed to take for the cuttlepuss to start having an effect on people nearby? We didn't test that, and according to Daddy, Whately was less than entirely forthcoming on that point. Luna shrugged weakly. Maybe a couple of days for the effects to start, a week before everyone starts hacking away at each other. And of course there'd be some hard time limit, Harry muttered. I'm going to help Daddy anyway, but would you two please come, too? Hermione looked up again at the sky. I suppose it'd be dry, at least. That's some benefit. Well, this is cheery, Harry muttered darkly as he and his lovers walked side by side through the path of broken limbs and crushed bushes that ran through the woods next to the little hamlet of Ottery Street. Catchpole. Pleas at Hogwarts were boring, no mistake about that, but he would much rather sit in the castle being lectured about spells he already knew than traipse around a dark forest hunting some lethal monstrosity. Why does you Dad need help if the cuttlepuss leaves tracks this wide? Luna shrugged. That is a very good question. With a very bad answer, came a voice from behind them. They leapt and whirled around, coming face to face with the very man they had been searching for. Why are we stopping? Come along. They shared unamused glances and followed the wizard in his tie-dyed robes as he led them to a small clearing. In the middle was a puddle of green goo, still glowing faintly. This is as far as I could manage to track it. If you look, he pointed to a number of wide trails running away from them, you can see why things got more difficult. I'm not sure which path the cuttlepuss took, or if it took none or all of them. What do you mean, all of them? Hermione demanded. Zeno gestured again. None of these paths are as wide as the one we just walked down. Josephine mentioned to me that there was some debate over how a creature without noticeable UAL organs would be capable of reproduction, and the idea that it could split apart into multiple entities that would then be capable of further growth cannot be ruled out. So there could now be lots of nightmare-inducing terrors running around. Harry summed up. Fantastic. Oh, I quite agree. A most fascinating species, Zeno said with a nod, totally oblivious to the sarcasm dripping from the time traveler's words. Unfortunately, it would just be unneighborly to let the cuttlepusses, prey on the muggles in town. Luna, did you bring your broom like I asked you? Suiting words to actions, he unshrunk a broom he pulled from his pocket and looked at her expectantly. Daddy, you know I don't own one. She removed a thin object from her own pocket and enlarged it into Harry's firebolt. So you should be very glad that my boyfriend doesn't mind me riding his broomstick whenever I want. The eccentric wizard nodded. Just so long as you're staying safe. Of course, Daddy. I talked with Madame Pomfrey, and she made sure I knew the appropriate charms. She doesn't like it when people come to her after a tumble because they weren't thinking ahead. Why, she told me one girl didn't listen to her and suffered the same accident 3 times before finally deciding to use protection. Most unfortunate, Zeno agreed before sighing wistfully. Oh, if only your mother were still alive. she would have made sure you knew everything she could teach you on the subject. Why, there was nothing she loved more than spending a lazy Sunday afternoon riding my broom. For some reason, I don't think they're talking about flying anymore." Harry coughed to regain the Lovegood's attention. "While that information is good to know, we really should be getting on with the search, don't you think?" "Good point, Harry. Yes, we should. I'll take the path that leads towards town," Zeno said, pointing out the route in question. "As the one who knows most about the Cuddlepus, I'm the best equipped to deal with it should it go after other people." "Luna showed you both the basement, yes?" Harry and Hermione nodded. "I took the portkey wards down for the day, so when you find it, just tag it with one and send it back home." Zeno, why would you think we know how to make portkeys?" the brunette asked. All three of the time travelers did know, of course, but that was something they wanted to keep secret. Portkey creation was highly regulated by the Ministry, which was not a great surprise. Considering how seriously they took allegations that Dumbledore was building an army of underaged and undertrained wizards and witches with which to lay siege to the government, the idea that someone could move a force of dozens or even hundreds without any warning would be absolutely terrifying. All it would take was a single mole gaining access to a secure location, like, say, the minister's office, for an insurgent group to take full control. Which, now that I think about it, could be exactly how Voldemort took over during the Second War. Scrimgeour wouldn't have time to react if his enemy just suddenly appeared in front of him and hit him with a spell. The Lovegood patriarch blinked at Hermione's question. "Well, I figured it was a safe option considering that you've done it before. Don't worry about a thing. As long as you do the same thing that you did last time, you'll be just fine." Without waiting for her reply, he leapt onto his broom and took to the skies. Hermione, in turn, looked at Luna. "I know you love your dad, but there are times I have to wonder if he's all there." "I know. He occasionally has trouble remembering what's when and when's where. He thinks it was due to dating a nymph when he was 20. Throwing one leg over the firebolt, she asked, "Well, aren't you coming?" "Sure. Give us a minute," the elder of his girlfriends answered with a grimace. Harry had to bite back a laugh at that. Not everyone necessarily enjoyed his or her animagus form, and Hermione was most definitely a member of that group. She only transformed when she absolutely had to, and never stayed in her other shape for longer than it took to complete whatever task she set for herself. With a thought, his bones twisted and his flesh compressed as he assumed the guise of a peregrine falcon, and he turned to watch the end of her significantly slower shift. A few seconds later, where there once had been a woman in a 16-year-old body now stood an adult little owl. Only 9 inches tall and with a brown and white color scheme, she furrowed her eyebrows at him before puffing up at his no doubt amused gaze. He screeched gently at her and took wing. She hesitantly joined him in the air a few moments later. Someone who was afraid of heights having an avian animagus form was a bit of a waste, he had always thought, but the other connections Luna had noted more than made up for it. Both birds perched on the tip of the broomstick, and the pointed at 2 of the remaining trails. "Harry, you take the path on the left. Hermione, you on the right, and I'll go the middle route. If you find a Cuddlepus, change back and let me know via your earrings, okay?" They bobbed their heads and took off. How in the world am I supposed to find one of these things if it's hiding? Harry wondered after nearly 3 hours spent searching the forest. He was not soaring over the trees, which would have been easier. Falcons did not actively fly nearly as much as they glided, taking advantage of thermal updrafts to keep them aloft. Unfortunately, that would have forced him to peer through the canopy from a couple of 100 meters up, and though that was normally sufficient for noticing the movement of prey, he was doubtful that he could spot a motionless abomination with that method. That meant he was forced to expend a large amount of energy flapping around tree trunks as he stayed only a half-dozen meters off the ground. Close enough to spot the monstrosity, far enough away to, hopefully, be out of its reach. He was seriously contemplating taking a quick break to catch a squirrel or rabbit. It would not be the first time he had had to hunt in the middle of a search to regain lost energy, and woodland animals would taste infinitely better than the rats in London, when a phosphorescent glow to his right caught his attention. Swerving towards the light, he was shocked when the Cuddlepus came into sight. Rather than the tree-like shape it had previously been in, it was now something not too dissimilar to a gigantic slug, albeit one still made of twisted bones and covered in slime. Corrosive slime, he amended as he saw the thin trails of smoke wafting up from the ground and the leaves and twigs on the forest floor wither away to nothing. I would not want to be caught by this thing. Flapping to a sturdy tree he reverted to his human form. Luna Lovegood, reading you loud and clear, darling. Did you find a cuddlepus, or did you just need to hear the dulcet tones of my voice? Please remember that I've heard both you and Hermione singing, or at least trying to. It's not Umbridge bad, but you still sent Crookshanks fleeing like the Kitty Grim Reaper was on his tail. Did you find the damn thing or not? He grinned at her frustrated tone. Luna was exceptionally good at sidestepping barbs, making poking fun at her less than entertaining, but the rare times he or Hermione could tag her always made him happy. She'd get him back, he knew, but that just made their game all the more fun. Yeah, I'm looking right at it. Turns out it actually looked better as a tree thing, hard as that is to believe. I wouldn't know, I'm still looking for mine. Daddy's helping since he spotted his a bit ago. Where was it? It hadn't gotten into the town, had it? He asked worriedly. Not that he could tell, she answered. Oh, there it is. Hermione already got hers a couple of minutes ago, so catch yours and head on to the house. Do you want to spin back a few hours or go straight back to Hogwarts? He narrowed his eyes at that question. Luna had placed just slightly more emphasis on the second option. That's right, you have herbology this morning, don't you? I'm quite sure you're mistaken. Considering the heat we still have on us from Ron's little surgery, it'd be best if we portrayed ourselves as model students for a while, he said with a smile. Indeed, the redhead had not been in the best of spirits when he finally returned from a week in St. Mungo's. While Harry was sure the healers had patched him up as best as they could, and with magic that was pretty well, someone who would remain nameless but had a planet-sized grudge against the little shit had revealed to Lavender Brown and Parvati Potle, the gossip queens of Hogwarts, just what damage was done to the boy. The whole school had known by lunchtime the next day. That means not missing a CL inexplicably. Damn it. Damn Dumbledore. Damn Ron. Damn Voldemort. All this because you want to skip herbology? He asked incredulously. Yes. Okay. That was a bit more vehement than I expected. Harry shook his head in surprise before noticing that the cuddlepus was oozing away from him. Summoning a rock and visualizing the Lovegood's basement, he incanted Portus, and banished it at the fleeing abomination. As soon as the stone hit it, it let out a monstrous scream before vanishing as if it had never been. He shivered at the lingering echo of the scream before commenting, Luna, if your dad loses this creature again, I'm going to burn the blasted thing to ash. If he loses it again, I just might help you do that. Mr. Potter, thank you for making it to this meeting. I do apologize for cutting into your CL time. Harry waved away McGonagall's apology. Not a problem, Professor. I am less enthusiastic about divination now than I was as a third year, so an excuse to skip it was quite welcome. The witch nodded in understanding and waved the door closed. Her distaste for divination as a subject was well known. He could not help but smile as he compared this career counseling session with the last. Thanks to the compulsion he had placed on Umbridge in January, she was quite useless outside of her CL room, which alongside her not taking over for Dumbledore in this time stream meant she could not squeeze her way into the meeting and throw out sycophantic comments while vowing that he would never become an Auror. Speaking of which, I really need to remove those spells at some point. Just because she doesn't know what's caused them doesn't mean someone else wouldn't. Then again, it's already late April and she still hasn't seen anyone about them, so I doubt I need to worry about it just yet. Now, this meeting is to talk over any career ideas you might have and to help you decide which subjects you should continue into 6th and 7th years, the Scotswoman said from behind her desk. Have you any thoughts about what you would like to do after you leave Hogwarts? He opened his mouth to respond, and then closed it as he actually considered the question. You know, there isn't much I really want to do, at least not that I would admit to her. Professional burglar isn't exactly a job that Hogwarts staff could condone even if they wanted to. And in all honesty, the only job I really care about, the same one I was more or less planning for before the Third War kicked off, is being a stay-at-home dad. Hermione was going to be a healer, and Luna was about through with her spellcrafter apprenticeship, so along with the rest of my family's money it wasn't like we were hurting for gold. That's doubly true this go-round thanks to all the money we stole from the Death Eaters. Huh, is there anything else I could possibly see myself doing with my life? Mr. Potter. Sorry, Professor, he answered, stirring himself from his introspection. Your question caught me off guard. What I want to do after graduating isn't something I've spent a lot of time considering. She sighed and pulled a sheet of parchment in front of her. While that's disappointing to hear, I can't say I'm really surprised. This is probably the first normal year you've had here since you started. No possessed professors after immortality, no giant venomous SS, no escaped murderers and soul-eating demons, no deadly tournament. He nodded. Yes, normal took a bit of getting used to. Indeed, she replied, her lips pursed. Glancing at the parchment, she commented, now, Professor Lupin commented, that you had great aptitude in defense against the dark arts, and your scores in that CL have been consistently high with the exception of this year, though I think we both know that that is due to, shall we say, unexpected circumstances. Perhaps you would enjoy working in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Speaking confidentially, Moody and Tonks both had very good things to say about you following your stay at headquarters this Christmas. He smiled to himself. The idea of joining the Aurors and at the same time continuing their thievery did have a certain amusing irony to it. Even better would be if he was placed in charge of his own manhunt. Nevertheless, Professor, I've already spent the last 4 years fighting dark wizards. That isn't something I want to do any more than I absolutely have to. McGonagall winced the slightest amount at that retort. Obviously she had not looked at her suggestion from that point of view. I see. Professor Slughorn has praised your potions talent multiple times, but he also said that it was not a subject you enjoyed. He nodded, and she gave him a knowing gaze. Well, then, what about teaching? What? He demanded sharply. Mr. Potter, I do have eyes. When someone like Mr. Longbottom, who his entire time at this school has had significant problems with spell casting, steadily improves over a span of months until he is in the top quarter of his CL, I naturally take a look to see what has changed. Imagine my surprise when, after following the pair of you in my animagus form and under a disillusionment charm, I discovered that you, along with Miss Granger and Miss Lovegood, were tutoring 5 students in defense, and doing it exceptionally well. She laughed at his shocked expression. It was a good thing I changed so no one would notice my form wavering as I moved around. You 3 were very thorough in making sure you would not be discovered. Mad Eye would have approved of your paranoia. Damn it, we never checked for animagi hiding in the room. Hominum Revelio works just fine on people, but she was a cat at the time. There was no way that spell would expose her. How long have you known? He finally asked. She shrugged. 2 months. It was just after that I added you to the group of students I asked to East when others are struggling with a spell. I wanted to see if your ability to teach could extend to transfiguration as well. I was quite happy when it did. There was not much he could say to that, really. In the old timeline, none of the professors had said anything to him about him teaching, and the idea had never entered his mind on its own. He had been too focused on qualifying to be an Auror to consider anything else, at least until his inevitable burnout following the Second War. After that, he had just been enjoying his relationship with his girls until the Third War broke out. Would I enjoy teaching? Actually leading the DA last time was fun, and this time even more so, though some of that is, or rather was, knowing that we were pulling it off without the risk of anyone else finding out about it. I doubt I'd do defense. Too many chances for someone to use what I taught to bully someone else, but I did fall in love with charms after we graduated. Eventually finding his voice, he said softly, I must admit that teaching is something I had never considered. Is there any way we can reschedule the rest of this meeting? I need some time to think on this. Of course, Mr. Potter. My door is always open. He nodded and rose from the chair. Halfway to the door, she added, but just in case you were curious, the requirement for teaching a subject at Hogwarts is having a mastery in that particular field, though some of the other schools in this country will accept an O in the relevant newt. Looking at your marks throughout your time here, I expect you would find attaining a mastery in defense, charms, or potentially transfiguration to be a challenging but rewarding experience. He twisted around to look back at the professor's smile. Do consider it, Mr. Potter, we always need good teachers. Glancing again at the note that had been waiting on her bedside table when she woke that morning, Luna turned to the portrait of 4 haughty witches playing bridge that hung just down the corridor from the Ravenclaw common room. Could one of you please tell Professor Flitwick that Luna Lovegood is here? He's expecting me. One of the women huffed silently and disappeared beyond the frame, and a moment later the portrait swung open to allow her entry. Miss Lovegood, come in, the quarter goblin said, waving to the chair in front of his desk, coincidentally the only item in the room that was sized for a normal human rather than his significantly shorter frame. I'm sure you're confused about why I asked to see you this morning. It was something I wondered about, yes. Well, quite simply it relates to a surprise I received last evening. The proctors from the Wizarding Examination Authority are scheduled to arrive here in a couple of days, but before they did, they wanted my opinion on something. He pulled a sheet of parchment out from the middle of a small stack and slid it across the desktop to her. Do you recognize this, perchance? A quick glance was all she needed to know what it said. I do indeed, Professor. It's the letter I wrote them requesting to be allowed to take the owls next week with the 5th years. I'm actually rather curious about why they decided to forward it to you, she continued with a raised eyebrow. Miss Lovegood, it is not a common occurrence that a student from a lower CL asks to take the OWL exams a year early, and even rarer is it that said student is truly ready, Flitwick answered shortly. He shook his head. When they sent it to me, I thought it was one of your housemates playing an ill-planned joke on you. Now, I'm not unaware that you are currently at the top of your year, and in every subject to boot, he added with a bright grin, but that does not mean that you are necessarily prepared for this. You can only take the owls once, and scoring poorly on them because you overreached would drastically reduce the opportunities a smart girl like yourself can expect once she graduates. The could not withhold her smile upon hearing that. Her experience with her head of house had been practically non-existent in the first time stream. In fact, she could not recall him even being in the tower more than a handful of times each year, leaving the house in the hands of the prefects. She had started this year expecting it to be the same, even after making sure her housemates knew she was no longer someone to be trifled with, but her putting Chong, Edgecombe, and Desford in their places had instead caused him to sit up and take notice of exactly what was going on in his house. Ever since then, he had been much more attentive, approachable, to her and the other ravens. This meeting was just one example of how he had changed over the preceding 9 months. Had she not shaken things up, he probably would not have asked her what she was thinking, merely thrown her request in the rubbish bin and gone on his merry way. Or at least the old Flitwick would have, she reminded herself. It was hard, sometimes, to remember that she could not definitively conclude whether people's reactions to her this year was due to her and her lovers changing things right and left or them being slightly different from the people she had known in the former timeline. Redirecting her mind from its meandering musings, she nodded at the little man. I am fully aware of what should happen should I fail these exams, Professor. However, I have spent the past year practicing extensively with Harry and Hermione, even if what we're practicing isn't just OWL-level magic, and they both assure me that I am more than ready to take them. She cocked her head. If I am capable of excelling, should I not do so? Or would I be better served pretending to be ashamed of my hard-earned skills? Miss Lovegood, I would never tell one of my students not to hold themselves to their highest standards, he replied in a sharp tone, though his voice softened as he continued, but the fact remains that looking after your best interests sometimes means keeping you from flying too high lest you lose your wings. So your response to my request is a no, then? I'm afraid so, the professor answered with a nod. You know, I can't exactly fault him for taking this position, Luna thought to herself. After all, he was completely unaware that she was actually 25 and not the 15-year-old that she appeared to be. If that were the case, he would have a valid point that she would almost certainly not be ready to take the exams. That he was taking the time to explain his reasoning, and even more that said reasoning was, at least on the surface, built upon his concern for her future prospects, was an encouraging thought. If only he could have been like this when I actually was a student, a caring Flitwick would have made my time here far more enjoyable. That's too bad. After a moment, she shrugged her shoulders. Oh, well, I suppose I'll just have to take them this summer, instead. Sorry about wasting your time, Professor. She moved to stand from the chair, but Flitwick's spluttering caused her to stop. "What are you talking about, Miss Lovegood?" "Oh, I thought it was fairly obvious," he answered airily. "If I can't take the exams here, that just means I will need to reschedule them after school's dismissed. All it will take at that point is permission from my father, which he's already urged me he would give. I wanted to sit the owls here with the 5th years purely because it would be less of a HLE for everyone involved." "You are truly this determined to take these exams a year early?" asked the wizard, and then he sighed at her nod. "And nothing I say will convince you otherwise." "I'm afraid not, Professor. I am not being separated from my lovers because the 3 months between my birthday and Harry's means I was placed in the CL below theirs. Once someone has her OWL scores, she is no longer required to attend school, and while the 3 of us have not read through the entire Leary, I'll be damned if I'm going to be forced to stay here for another year without them, or worse, force them to stick around and be bored for the same period. Besides, I've already taken these tests once before. If I can't breeze through them now, I have a major problem on my hands." Flitwick dropped his head for a few moments before sighing again. "If you are dead set on doing this, I suppose I may as well help. I certainly can't think of a way to stop you." Pulling another form from the same stack as her letter and dipping his quill in an inkwell, he raised his eyes to meet hers. "That said, I truly hope you're as prepared as you think you are. I don't know how I could possibly help should you not be." "I thank you for your concern, Professor, but there's nothing to worry about," Luna said with a sweet smile. "I promise you that I am more than ready." Amelia hummed a faint tune as she stepped into her office. Being the head of the DMLE was often a stressful and thankless job, but that did not mean that there could be no good days. Considering that just the previous night had seen the MLEP boys bringing in the wizard who had been burgling young witches' houses and the hit wizards arresting a contract killer suspected of the murder of a family of 4 in Ramsgate, she had a good reason to be happy this morning. Her jovial mood died as she stepped around her desk to set her purse down and her eyes fell on a book sitting on her desk. "That's strange. I know I didn't put that there when I left last night." She was extremely cautious about her office security. Whenever she finished for the day, she laid a stone-touch charm on her desk and filing cabinet to temporarily paralyze anyone or anything that came in contact with the furniture. It had only taken 2 days for the elves kept by the ministry to learn to clean the room when she stepped out for lunch rather than wait until after the workday. She was therefore understandably curious and suspicious about who had managed to sneak this book in. "Fater periculum," she intoned, aiming the jet of blue-white light at the black cover. The strange book glowed a healthy green, signifying that there were no dangerous spells or potions present, but she still flicked her wand to open it rather than reach out with her hand. In a past or present Auror's life, there was no such thing as being too careful. Disabling the charms and then leaning over to look at the text within, she quickly forgot her caution. The book was organized like an accountant's ledger, each page broken up into sections that detailed names, amounts, and reasons for what she could only guess was every bribe Fudge had accepted throughout his entire career in the ministry. Flipping further in, she was shocked at the sheer amount of information, as well as the prices the former minister had charged for his services. The more recent entries had another surprise, however. Scattered throughout were records that had been charmed a bright sunshine yellow, as well as a few where the name alone had been blackened to illegibility with a thick line. Did the person who left this try to edit out his own name so I couldn't catch him? She wondered. She picked the book up to show to Scrimgeour. Many of the names listed were people influential enough or violent enough she would only feel confident arresting if she sent a full team of Aurors to their locations, when a sealed red envelope slipped out and fell back onto the desk. Before she could draw her wand to silence it, the howler opened itself, and a familiar metallic voice echoed in her office. "Good morning, Madam Bones, Mr. Fox said, thankfully quiet enough that it did not risk bursting her eardrums, and she took the opportunity to shoot a spell at the door to close and lock it. "When last we spoke, you asked me to get in touch with my sources and see if they would allow me to share the information I had about how I was able to prove that all my targets were Death Eaters or supporters of the same. Unfortunately, that request was denied, but as someone reminded me recently, there is more than one way to skin an easel. On your desk, you have found a book filled with names and bribes. I borrowed this from our illustrious ex-minister. Say what you will about his fortitude and drive, but he truly is a meticulous note-taker. To make things easier for you, all the entries that have been highlighted belong to Death Eaters whose properties I have yet to rob. Amelia's smile returned at those words, and it shone even brighter than it had before. It was not proof that they were terrorists, but it would allow her to legally bring them in for questioning. If they happened to be handcuffed to a chair that was charmed to compel anyone sitting in it to tell the truth, they could certainly get some useful information out of the interrogations. It might even, if she were very lucky, get her approval to use Veritaserum on a few of them, whereupon carefully planned questions could give her enough information to implicate others who were otherwise politically untouchable. However, things are not quite as simple as they once were, the Master Thief continued. Possibly due in part to my recent activities, the Death Eaters whose houses are no longer secure have moved into the homes that I have not entered. Stuck to the back cover you will find a list. Amelia turned to the last page and found a folded sheet of parchment exactly where he had described, that describes who has taken refuge with whom. I felt it would greatly sour our working relationship if my information led your men to try barging into a house only to find 11 genocidal bigots rather than the 2 they expected. Now, there is one individual whose name I have redacted. I am sure that you will only need a minute or 2 to figure out who this person is. My reasons for removing this information were twofold. First, I bear this wizard a personal grudge and so do not want to pee up an opportunity to strip his house down to the bedrock. She rolled her eyes at that, though she supposed she should be glad that Mr. Fox was at least being honest about his intentions. Second, this person is hosting someone far more important than a few of his old war buddies. Do you recall that I mentioned believing the Death Eater's master had indeed returned? I now have incontrovertible proof that you know who does walk the earth once more. Her mouth thinned to a grim line. Of all the worst-case scenarios, this is not meant as a slight to your Aurors. I was rather impressed with most of those you brought with you to our last meeting, but my information indicates that they are not really trained to sneak in and innate a Dark Lord in his own throne room. My own particular skills, however, are far more suited to this task. I can handle you know who, you just need to keep him from calling in additional minions to back him up. I will be attacking his stronghold at 8 in the morning on June 12th, which leaves you with more than 2 weeks to prepare your men for their part of the job. Though our prior discussion was brief, you struck me as a fair and honorable witch, Madam Bones. Do not make me regret trusting you. The howler burst into sudden flame and reduced itself to ash, leaving Amelia standing there in shock. A thief, even a powerful thief, going after Voldemort on his own. That wasn't courage, that was suicide. She almost tore the book in two as she opened it and flipped through the pages, searching for hints toward the identity of the unnamed Death Eater described within. Her movements slowed, however, as his voice played again in her mind. Do not make me regret trusting you. They are not really trained to sneak in and innate a Dark Lord. He had said he trusted her, but could she afford to trust him? No one had managed to do more than scratch Voldemort during the war, and Mr. Fox was claiming that he could slip inside and kill him. It was preposterous on many levels, and yet, he's not just an idiot with more power than is good for him. All of his robberies were not done by overwhelming everyone and everything that got in his way. With how he was able to break in while the owners were gone, he had to have spent a great deal of time surveilling them and planning the perfect time to strike, not to mention how he took out the portraits. Not just strength, but intelligence and skill as well. If he's not going to fight Voldemort head to head, he might actually be able to pull his part of the plan off. And even if he fails, at least he'll be drawing the heat away from my men, the cynical part of her could not help but throw in. Harry only flicked his eyes to the side when Luna, clad in her black bodysuit and blue mask, apparated beside him. Everything's set up. That's good, he replied, returning his gaze to the house and bringing the omnioculars back to his face. Now let's just hope it works. Oh, I have no doubt that it will work. The issue is, will it work too well? What are the criteria for working too well, in this situation, anyway? Hermione asked from behind the pair. Though he did not look back, he knew she was sorting through the ward picks they had brought, some of them made specifically for today's mission. They now had a pick for each ward defending Malfoy Manor, which would not only dramatically reduce the amount of time needed to overload the wardstone but also do so without the flashes of light that were part and parcel of shattering the ward scheme. The less forewarning the Death Eaters inside had, the better. Luna shrugged. I'd say as long as we don't get killed, it's not too much. If that's our working definition, I'm not sure we're as prepared for this as we should be. Well, it isn't like we can back out now and try again, Harry reminded them. Dobby said Madam Bones was mobilizing the oars and hit wizards, and since that was 15 minutes ago and they still haven't shown up here, we can safely assume that she's on board with our plan. We are not going to fall through on our side. Yellow. Yes, red. He pocketed the omnioculars as well as the watch placed on the GR in front of him and stood. It's 8 on the dot. Time to get this show on the road. Bring down the wards. On it. Hermione stepped up to the line he had carved in the ground to delineate where the wards extended. Taking each pick in turn, she swiped in front of her a few times before moving on to the next. It was only thanks to the magicite charm he had applied to his mask that Harry could see the wards, depicted as thin sheets of color, disappear one by one until there was nothing between them and the mansion but empty air. Your turn, Blue. Send in the surprise to soften them up a bit. One surprise, coming right up. She pulled a palm-sized mirror from one of her pouches and chanted, Ia, Ia, Cthulhu Fatagan. A second later, the screaming started. Luna, what the hell was that? Hermione asked nervously, her fear causing her to forget to use their code names. They shrugged and winced when a particularly loud shriek came from inside the house. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't something I'd say by accident. I believe you succeeded in that goal admirably, Harry said with a small nod. Just never do it again. They waited for a full 2 minutes, wincing with each fresh wail and scream. Their vigil was interrupted when the mirror in Luna's hand relayed a loud crunch and was silent. The girl shook it a couple of times before looking to him and Hermione. Well, that's probably not good. What now? You remember how you said you wanted to make sure we could get it back out when we were ready to storm the gates? The youngest of the trio asked her girlfriend. I thought the best way to do that was to make sure the other mirror was placed right next to the portkey. Apparently, though, it's not anymore. Harry sighed. So, long story short, we just portkeyed in a human-eating eldritch abomination and can't send it back to your house unless we go in and yell the return phrase in person. Yes, wonderful. And the worst part, I can't even blame her for this. It was all my idea. Not for the first time since he had come up with this plan, he regretted bringing it up with his lovers. Yes, sending the cuddlepus in ahead of them to soften the Death Eaters up, that was, rend them limb from limb so that all the time travelers had to do afterwards was put the terrorists out of their misery, was certainly an effective plan, but that apparently did not mean that it was necessarily a good one. I guess I'm the one who has to go in and send it back to the Rook, then, aren't I? Hermione gulped loudly. Well, we could always let it finish them all off first and just not rob the house. But then how are we going to get it back out? Or do you really want it sitting around, breeding in? A loud explosion erupted from the manor, destroying large chunks of the walls and scattering brick over a 50-yard span. Almost echoing the blast, 1,000 inhuman voices shrieking in anger and pain rent the sky for a long moment before blessed silence returned. Harry drew his wand and spun on one heel, shouting the instant before he dissipated, Go, go. He reappeared in the midst of the devastation, smoke cutting his visibility down to only a few feet, and he did not wait a moment before aiming his acacia focus at one staggering Death Eater. Compulso! He screamed, diving to the floor and rolling away from a Cruciatus curse thrown at him seemingly reflexively. The compulsion charm he had cast on the other man immediately set to work, and the terrorist turned on his fellows and quickly unleashed 3 jets of pale green light. In most combat situations, Harry did not have time to think of an elaborate compulsion like those he had been able to inflict on Umbridge, but kill the other Death Eaters was simple enough. His patsies generally did not last long. His current puppet was just that moment falling to the ground, several curses ending the wizard's life, but when all he needed were disposable soldiers, this strategy worked perfectly. 2 more cracks signified the girls appearing, and they sprinted to cover, flinging spells of their own as they slid through the wide pools of blood and slime on the floor. Hermione's reductor curse hit someone from the splattering sound that followed, and a number of multicolored spells shot from Luna's wand into the lingering dust, though whether they were effective he was unsure. A volley of killing curses flying at them in response proved that there were at least a few enemies still standing. Using his ritual-enhanced power to his advantage, Harry rose from behind the chunk of wall he was using as cover and flung his arm in a wide arc at what should have been waist height. Defendo. His spell lashed out in a pale red crescent, slicing through the smoke and the Death Eaters hidden inside it. A few more unforgivables flew his way, but after a silent repetition of the spell, there was nothing. Ventus, Hermione muttered from the other side of the hallway, and a brisk wind sprung up from nowhere to blow away the smoke. Their vision now unimpeded, the trio could see the fallen before them, what few were not already dead well on their way. Standing from their crouched positions, they walked through the killing ground, unmasking the dead as they went. One Death Eater, body sliced in half at the waist, was revealed to be Narcissa Malfoy, and a quick search of the rest of the remains eventually had the oldest of the thieves hesitantly levitating over to them the half of a face and some blonde locks that were all that was left of Lucius. She dropped it with a shudder and said, "Let's deal with Voldemort and get out of here." Harry nodded. "Yes, let's finish this. And this time, there will be no coming back for him." Their path through the rest of the manor was almost too quiet. Clearly their use of the cuttlebus to attract all the Death Eaters to one spot had been successful. Walking down the stairs to the manor's basement, the same place Voldemort had been holed up in the previous time stream, he held up a fist to tell the girls to stop. "Are you two ready?" They looked to each other for a moment before turning back to him. "We're ready," Luna answered. "Blasting curses on 3, he said, aiming his wand at the door. In his peripheral vision, he could see the girls' wands over either shoulder. 1, 2, 3, Confringo. The yellow spells crashed into the door, shredding it and hurling the fragments into the room. At the other end, several chunks of debris bounced off a shield, and the incantation for the bone-breaking hex was already on the tip of his tongue when Harry noticed just who it was who had cast the shield charm. It was not Voldemort, as he expected. It was not a Death Eater, either. Instead, a man in a black leather bodysuit and a red fox mask lowered his wand. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me," Hermione muttered from his right as she took in the wizard's 2 companions, each dressed the same as the man except for their yellow and blue masks. Those attires were extremely familiar. After all, the trio were just that moment wearing the exact same thing. The Luna at the other side of the room waved them closer from where she was sitting on the floor. "Thank goodness you're here. We were getting tired of waiting." "Sorry we took so long," present Luna replied in an all too chipper voice. She nodded at the table their future selves sat around, the cards and chips indicating that they had interrupted their other version's blackjack game. "At least you weren't too bored." "Who's winning?" "Hermione, of course. She's cheating, like she always does," answered future Harry. "I do not. Just because Vegas casinos don't allow card counting does not mean that it's cheating, just that it loses the money. And that's also why we don't play this game with you too often," present Harry retorted, getting nods from the future him and both Lunas. "I have to ask, though, where'd you stash Voldemort?" Future Luna snickered and waved her wand at the wooden table, and it transformed back into the unconscious Dark Lord. "We figured we could at least get some use out of him. Anyway, we better head out. We need clean this place out and turn back time again if we want to be at Hogwarts for breakfast and an alibi." Toodles. With a series of loud cracks, the 3 thieves and their prisoner vanished, the cards and chips falling to the ground. Hermione sighed and vanished the detritus. "Harry, why do we always have to clean up after you?" "Hardy har har." He shook his head. "Dobby, we need a time turner, please." The little golden Hourgle appeared in front of them, and he wasted no time in picking it up and stretching the chain until it went around the 3 of them. He flipped the GL once, colors swirling around them in an unruly storm before solidifying again. 5 feet away, Voldemort looked up from his seat on his throne and barely had the time to widen his eyes in surprise before their simultaneous stunners smashed into him. Hermione stepped closer and looked down at the slumped wizard. "This really should not have been this easy." "Shish, don't jinx us now," Luna hissed. "No, seriously, this should have been a lot harder. I mean, coming back in time to take him out I can understand, but the only reason that plan actually worked was because we had already done it. We're talking about a self-sustained causality loop, which is supposed to be impossible. It opens the door for all kinds of paradoxes. Both of you, please be quiet," Harry begged as he rubbed his temples in a futile attempt to stave off the headache building behind his eyes. "I bloody hate time travel. They were silent for a long moment before they asked, "So, what are we going to do with him now?" "I have no clue, Harry. Beats me." He paused as a wonderful, terrible idea unfolded in his mind. Oh, that could work. What? Smiling viciously behind his mask, he explained the plan to them, and Luna shook her head once he was finished. "Oh, Harry, that's just cruel." She laughed. "I like it." Tonks took her position beside Shacklebolt as the large wizard stopped and aimed his wand. "Saluter," he intoned, a spark of bright white leaping from the tip of his wand and making the large dome of the Bulstrode's wards flash. The squad of Aurors, half a dozen strong even if 4 of them were disillusioned, waited impatiently until the head of the household exited his front door and trudged over to them. Marcus Bulstrode was a large man, both tall and broad, and as he approached, Tonks could not help but wonder if he perhaps had troll or giant blood in him. It would certainly explain why the top of even Shaq's head did not reach the level of the man's shoulders. Looking down at them with disdain, Bulstrode grunted, "What does the DMLE want with me now?" "We actually came to ask for your help," the senior Auror replied calmly. "You've heard about this fox thief, who's been going around and robbing large manors, I take it?" Bulstrode nodded, an angry sneer growing on his face. "Well, we've been tracking him down for a few months now, and we wondered if you'd heard anything that could possibly be of use to our investigation." "Maybe I have," the large wizard answered slowly. "Just the other day, in F.A. Tonks huffed loudly, interrupting Bulstrode. "Do you think we could maybe take this inside? It's rude to talk to your guests on the lawn, you know." "Auror Tonks," Shacklebolt barked. "What? It's hot out here." Fine, you can come in," the other wizard growled, turning away to return to the house. "Give me a second to let you through." Once Bulstrode was out of earshot, the African wizard gave her an amused glance from the corner of his eye. "Not bad. Hey, when I was a kid my mum forced me to learn all the purebloods' rules of hospitality. Said I'd never know when I'd need them. If she hears about this, she's never gonna let me live it down." The GR rustled as the other 4 Aurors stepped to their sides, and a few moments later, the air wavered with a multitude of colors before returning to normal. She and Shaq hesitated a second longer to let the rest of the team through before stepping over the boundary. Immediately after they did, the wards slammed back down. "Now comes the hard part," she thought, tightening the grip on her wand in her pocket. Bulstrode opened the door for them, scowling that he had to accept them in at all, and that expression was frozen on his face when a stunner shot out of thin air and threw him to the ground. 8 more to go, Shacklebolt reminded them. "Move out and bring down the rest of the Bulstrodes and the knots." She jogged down the hallway, the thudding of her squad echoing behind them. Taking a left while the rest continued straight, she just barely caught a glance of a shocked face before the other which spun around to run away. "Stupefy, Incarcerus, Petrificus Totalis," Tonks yelled, the lights and net hurtling into the suspect. Her eyes flicked over the room the woman was trying to escape into when the screams of hexes and curses came from behind her. Slipping inside the room to make sure it was empty, she levitated the woman she had brought down and held the witch in front of her just in case one of their targets slipped past the rest. "Sound off," her partner called half a minute later. "Shacklebolt, 2, grinning," she replied. "Tonks, 1. Daniels, 1. Jacobson, 2. O'Brien, 2. Rupert, 1. "That's all of them," Shaq said, leading the rest of the team from deeper in the house. "Now let's knock out the wardstone and get these bastards back to the ministry." 9 Death Eaters taken down, the rest of the Aurors are already attacking their targets, and Madame Bones said she had someone especially skilled hitting you-know-who's hiding spot itself, she thought with a fierce smile. "Now that's what I call a good day on the job." A snickering, dark-clad figure slipped silently out of Amelia Bones's office, a file folder clasped tightly in hand. Left behind by this individual was a sheet of parchment on the witch's desk where she could easily find it the next morning. "Madame Bones, I was quite pleased when I saw in the Daily Prophet that you had arrested the remaining Death Eaters. I do not trust easily, and you cannot imagine how happy I am that you proved yourself deserving of that trust. As for my own end of our deal, you know who is not a threat to anyone any longer. Britain can at long last heal from the scars his reign of terror left behind. Speaking of threats, now that my task is done, I have no reason to stay in this country." You have no need to fear any further crimes from me, at least not in the foreseeable future, and much as I have enjoyed our little game of cat and mouse, all good things must come to an end. I have to admit to being disappointed that we did not have the chance to interact more. Of all the law enforcement officers and directors I have dealt with, you are by far the most honest and honorable. But who knows? Perhaps we will have a chance to see each other again, and in more friendly circumstances. Your neighborhood burglar, the Hooded Fox, aka Mr. Fox. P.S. I hope you don't mind, but I'm taking your file about me with me. Partly it's because you don't need it anymore, mostly it's because I'm curious who you think I am. P.P.S. I just read the file. You were nowhere close. And time. Please give your exams to me and exit the room in an orderly fashion. Harry stood from the desk and made his way to the front of the Great Hall, handing the parchment to the elderly examiner. With history of magic over, and possibly with a ping grade this time, he and his girlfriends were now officially done with their owls and only had a few days to kill before they could leave the castle and return to their respective homes. He rejoined his girls where they waited for him just outside the hall, and together they found, entered, and barricaded an empty CL room. Turning back to them, he said, "So, decision time. Now that we no longer have to attend Hogwarts, are we going to return for a repeat of our 6th year?" Merlin: "No, this year was bad enough. I'd go insane if I had to do that all over again," Hermione snarled in distaste. Luna shrugged. "Since I learned all the 6th year material from you two, it would be a new experience for me, but I very much doubt that I'd actually learn anything." "You wouldn't, trust me. Honestly, I just want to take my newts and restart my healing training." The bushy brunette hummed for a moment. "In fact, if we take them the summer after next year, which would give us time to study, it would probably make getting into our apprenticeships easier. They'd love us for acing the exams a year early. And I might actually take them this time around." In the previous timeline, he had only sat for the defense against the dark arts newt, but it would not hurt him to take a few more. After all, he still was undecided about what he wanted to do to occupy his time while his girlfriends were busy studying for their careers. He exchanged a weighty look with both girls. "If we aren't staying for Cleese, and I doubt we'll have much to do with anyone at this school ever again, then I guess it's time we got rid of the dead weight, isn't it?" Their sharp grins were answer enough. Panting for breath, Voldemort shot a quick glance over his shoulder and leapt over a fallen tree trunk to crouch behind it. How long had they been chasing him? Days, weeks, months. It was impossible to tell any more, if he ever could at all. A horn blasted to one side rather than behind him, and he cursed harshly before running again. He had not slept in 3 days, nor eaten in 5, and it was beginning to show. His endurance was running out. He needed to find someplace to rest, even if for a few hours, but there was nowhere for him to hide in this damnable forest. "Potter, when I get out of here, I'm going to mutilate you," he hissed through his teeth. "You and everyone you know and love, starting with those slags of yours. I'll make you regret ever doing this to me. Enervate." Voldemort groaned as awareness flooded back into him, and a moment later his memory returned as well. The intruders. He tried to stand, only to find thick metal rings binding his wrists and ankles and bands of leather wrapped around him to hold his legs together and his arms to his torso. The only part of his body that he could still move freely was his head, and he twisted that around to glance at his captor. "You," he growled upon seeing the black-clad figure looking down at him, the red fox mask displaying its eternal smirk. "Me." The wizard laughed in his metallic voice. "You know, I thought taking you out was going to be hard. We spent an entire year working to bring you down, and it turns out that getting rid of your Death Eaters was actually the hardest part. You were laughably easy." He gnashed his teeth silently at that. "Finally," he demanded, "how did you sneak into my lair?" The red-masked intruder rubbed his chin for a moment. "You know, I don't really want to tell you." Chuckling again, he pulled out a pale wand and pointed it at the Dark Lord. Voldemort was sure that he was about to be on the wrong side of a killing curse. Again, but all the other wizard did was levitate him to an upright position. "Besides, I think you should be more concerned with where you are now." "What is he talking about?" Voldemort looked away from the man, and his eyes widened at what he saw. Right in front of him, not 10 feet away, was a raised dais, and on top of that was a floating arch with a thin curtain falling to the floor. The intruders had brought him to the Vale of Death. Evanesco. He suddenly felt a breeze on his skin and heard a series of clinking on the ground, and from behind him appeared the blue-masked thief. A witch, judging by her voice, though the distortion made him the slightest bit unsure. "There, that's better. I have to admit, I knew you kept iron on you at all times, but I was not expecting you to have quite this much." She giggled then, and he cursed silently. This was bad. In all of his robes he had sewn 40 or 50 iron slivers, and in his pockets he kept small balls of the same metal. Iron was the only thing that could keep one safe from the fire, and now, thanks to these fools, he was defenseless. Accio bits of iron. As if he weren't vulnerable enough, the last intruder summoned the scraps across the room before making her way to them. "There, that should do it. Time for the next act, love." "I do believe it is." With a snarl, Voldemort demanded, "Who are you?" The trio shared a long glance before the Red One shrugged. The witches removed their masks first, revealing themselves to be substantially younger than he had expected. The blue intruder was with protruding silver eyes, and the one with the yellow mask was a rather plain-looking brunette. Then the leader of their little group removed his disguise, and Voldemort's vision grew as red as the mask in the boy's hand. "No, this isn't possible. It can't be." "I wouldn't say it's impossible," Potter replied with a sharp grin. "Just very, very unlikely." The boy who just wouldn't bloody die laughed a third time, his voice unaltered now. "It just struck me. Your organization is dismantled, your followers are either dead or in the DMLE's custody, and you're disarmed and helpless, all of which is the work of 3 kids who haven't even finished taking their owls. Are you sure you're really Dark Lord material?" No, this could not be true. It had to be a trick of some sort. A glamour, or polyjuice potion, or something. Potter clapped his hands together. "So, let's get this party started, shall we? I'm sure by now you're just dying to know why we kidnapped you and brought you here. You do know where we are, right? The Department of Mysteries. The Death Room. Close enough. You're wrong on one part, but since your informant didn't know what he was talking about either, I can't exactly blame you for that. Do you know why we brought you here?" The boy continued cheerfully. Staring at the veil, there was only one answer that made any sense. "You're going to kill me." "Kill you?" The teenagers looked at each other and laughed merrily. After a few moments, Potter calmed down enough to continue. "Oh, not at all, Tommy boy." Voldemort bared his teeth at his filthy Muggle name being spoken. "You see, death is too easy, too gentle. I needed something worse for you." "Worse?" he scoffed. "There is nothing worse than death." Potter shook his head, that blasted grin still on his face. "For all your knowledge and power, you're still just a foolish child who's scared of the dark, aren't you?" At his snarl, the T continued, "Having those you love die in your arms, though you, of course, wouldn't know about that, is a fate worse than death. Watching your world tear itself apart at the behest of a madman and knowing there is nothing you can do to stop it is a fate worse than death. Having your mind twisted until what's left is no longer you is a fate worse than death." In front of him, the veil stirred, and Potter smiled. "And being given to your worst enemies to be tortured until they grow bored of you. I'd say that's a fate worse than death, too." "Who are you?" Voldemort repeated in confusion. This did not sound like the bleating of the child who had run from him a year ago. "Who are you really?" "I'm Harry Potter," the boy replied with a wide grin. "But, and this is the important part, I'm not the Harry Potter native to this time stream. You see, I'm 25 years old. I fought against you in not only the Second War, but the Third as well. Some of your enemies offered me and my loves a chance to come back in time, and, well," Potter shrugged. "Our world was more or less about to end, anyway, so we didn't exactly have much to lose, now did we?" The Dark Lord blinked. Either Potter had completely lost it, or he was, hard as it was to believe, telling the truth. He was not exactly sure which option he wanted to be right. "But we've spent enough time chatting," Potter said, jerking his thumb at the veil. "I said before that you were only half right about where we are. You see, the veil isn't actually a portal to death." A breeze ruffled the ragged edges of the curtain, despite there being no wind in the room. "It's a portal to the realm of Lilith, the Fairy Queen." With a tremendous howl, the veil was whipped away from the floor, and in the space it had covered was a rippling view of a lush forest. In the middle stood a woman, her blue hair a strange counterpoint to her emerald dress, and she offered Voldemort a cold, cruel smile before turning to Potter. "Greetings, my champion. I must know, is that for me?" "It is, your majesty," the supposed man in a boy's skin answered with a low bow. "I know that your command was to kill him, but I thought it would only be polite to offer you the chance to show him your displeasure in your own way. Considering the crimes he and his counterpart committed against you and yours. Such a thoughtful gift you present to me," the Fairy Queen purred, and Voldemort swallowed fearfully. "Yes, choosing you as my champion was a wise decision indeed. Your task is complete, your debt is paid. Go now and live your life with my blessing. Daughter's mine." From beyond the borders of the Rip in reality, a little girl with blue skin in a glittering bathing suit and a nude, golden young woman stepped into view. "It seems we will soon have a guest. Tell the Kelpies to emblay at the stable, I feel like taking a ride today. And prepare my hounds." The wind abruptly changed direction, rushing into the portal, and Voldemort was flung to the ground. After no more than a heartbeat, he felt himself being pulled toward the veil. "No, this can't happen, Potter," he screamed, his terror obvious in his voice. "I'll give you whatever you want. Gold, power, your parents back from the dead. Anything. Just get me away from here." The boy buffed his fingernails against the leather of his clothing for a moment before answering. "I'm afraid I just can't do that. In case you forgot, your plans to steal the Phi magic you envied for so long angered the Fairy Queen. I can't even begin to explain just how bad a move that was," the cut-in. The brunette nodded. "But you know what they say. You reap what you sow." "True enough." Potter raised one hand, his green eyes glittering, and waggled his fingers in a mockery of a wave. "Bye-bye, Tom." "Oh, where are you?" The mocking call jerked Voldemort back from his reverie with a fresh wave of panic. "Where are you hiding, my dear Tom Marvolo Riddle? Come back. We just want to play. Play with my intestines, more like." He shuddered and then winced as the motion disturbed the deep slice on his left shoulder blade that the golden girl had left the last time she nearly caught him. Since they could not bear even the mere presence of iron, the fairies had apparently gotten very, very good at working with bronze. Between the armed and mounted warriors and the giant ring dogs, he felt like he was looking at a hunting scene from ancient times. A scene where he was the quarry. He moved to rub his brow and just barely stopped before again smacking himself in the face with the brown furred hoof that had taken the place of his right hand, its counterparts on his other three limbs. If that were not bad enough, he had been dealing with an itch on his forehead for 2 days that, as he had discovered when looking at his reflection in a puddle, was due to a pair of antlers growing out of his skull. "If I had known this would happen, I never would." He stopped and crossed his eyes to stare at the lower half of his face, where his mouth and nasal slits were now protruding a good 2 inches farther than they had a minute ago. That was not good. He had to find a place to rest soon. He could not come up with a way to reverse this hellish transfiguration if he was being chased from one side of the forest to the other. The baying of the hounds came from his left, and he cursed before resuming his run. He needed rest to think of a way out of this place, but escaping those dogs so they couldn't tear him into little pieces was even more important at the moment. Ron shoveled a forkful of potatoes into his mouth and glared at the empty seats around him. Ever since February, he had not had a single person sit next to him. If beside him was the only empty spot, they would squeeze in between 2 other people, and if he sat down next to someone, that person would get up and move elsewhere. Those that would take the time to look at him only did so with glares and scowls. Not even his own brothers would speak to him if they could find a way to get out of it. It was like he was considered an outcast by everyone in the school. "It's not my fault," he thought angrily. "Someone hung me from the ceiling and called me a rapist, but I didn't do anything. And because they ambushed me in bed, I didn't get the chance to make Hermione fall in love with me before the love potion wore off. Professor Dumbledore won't even give me a second chance at it, either. He said I was a bad investment, whatever that means. Why is everyone treating me like I'm a slimy S or something?" He took another bite, but then it jostled on its way down. Suddenly he felt a sharp jab in his throat, and though the pain made him gasp, he could not get any air. Just a few seconds later his lungs started to burn, trying to cough and wheeze just made the pain worse. He turned to his side to get someone's attention, but every single person refused to look at him. Not even waving his hand right in front of their faces could make them notice that he was in trouble. His vision blurred, and he tripped as he tried to stand, falling painfully to the stone floor in the middle of the great hall. The room was packed with students getting breakfast, but not a single person so much as glanced his way. Why were they ignoring him? Why weren't they helping him? His sight faded to black. Oh my! Professor Flitwick squeaked several minutes later as his eyes suddenly found the redhead laying motionless on the ground. It was at that moment that everyone else noticed him, too, and several girls screamed as they scrambled away from the blue-faced boy. Everyone, calm down, the diminutive teacher yelled, rushing from his chair to Ron's side. Wadawa-see. With the sound of plunger being pulled out of a toilet, something yellow and black flew up out of Ron's throat and onto his unmoving egg, muttered the quarter goblin as he stared at the bit of food. And it's already rotten. Shaking himself from his thoughts, he levitated Ron's disturbingly still body and ran out of the room, presumably to get the boy to Pomfrey for all the good it would do. Leaning against one of the tall doors and under a second notice me not charm, Luna bared her teeth in a grim parody of a smile. Justice is good, and proportionate justice is even better. She moved one arm in front of her abdomen, as if to protect her womb. But it's poetic justice that is the best kind. Draco's hands shook as he looked again at the letter in front of him. The Daily Prophet had gone on and on all week about notable purebloods being arrested for bribery and corruption, and then charges of murder, terrorism, and treason being added because they were Death Eaters. The first of the trials was slated to start the following week, but there was already talk about them being sentenced to life in Azkaban. Other people's fates were not what concerned him, however. What he cared about was that, while many purebloods he knew socially had been arrested, his parents were not mentioned even once. That would ordinarily be a good thing, but when he owled them for information on what was going on, they had not replied. 3 more letters he had sent, but still nothing. Then today, he got the news he had been dreading. Dear Mr. Draco Malfoy, it is my unfortunate duty to inform you that both of your parents, Lucius and Narcissa Malfoy, were found murdered in your family home yesterday morning. As of this point in time, the Department of Magical Law Enforcement does not have any solid leads as to the perpetrator of this ghastly crime, but they maintain that their investigation is still ongoing. As you are still a minor, and your listed godfather, Severus Snape, is also deceased, you have hereby been named a ward of the Ministry until such time as you reach your majority. A member of the WCS will be waiting for you upon your arrival at platform 9 3/4 to escort you to our office so that we can discuss your future housing options as well as the execution of your parents' wills. With much sympathy, Martin Shy, head of Wizarding Child Services. He crumpled the slip of parchment in his fist. His parents gone, murdered, and the DMLE was wasting their time prosecuting purebloods for getting rid of a few mudbloods. How was this fair? How was it right? They should be out looking for the scum who would dare kill a proper pureblood couple. Were their priorities really so screwed up? Voices from down the hall caught his attention, and his scowl morphed into something even darker. Potter and his slags. All year he had been looking for a chance to deal with the Scarhead. First Potter killed Severus, then he spent time waiting outside the Slytherin common room to curse him. He would not be surprised to find that Potter had a hand in his parents' deaths, too, at this rate. Unfortunately, the perfect Gryffindor golden boy being Dumbledore's pet meant no one would dare punish him. Well, Draco would. He would make Potter pay for what he had done. Hearing the half-blood coming closer, he let his hate fill him. Severus had taught him just the spell for this situation. His godfather had said it was only for his enemies, and if anyone was an enemy right now, it was Potter. He took a deep breath and jumped out of the alcove. Sectum sum. Defindo. The arc of light shot through the air before he could finish the incantation, and he watched in horror as his hand and most of his forearm drooped before falling to the floor, blood gushing out of the remaining stump. He opened his mouth to scream, but then Granger whispered something and he collapsed bonelessly. Really? Potter muttered, not even seeming to care that his spell had caused Draco to lose a hand. This was not how Dumbledore's pet Gryffindor was supposed to act. With both your parents dead, I thought you'd slink into the woodwork and leave us alone, but no, you just had to be me off. Using Sectum Sempra on us. The lion shook his head before squatting to put his head closer to Draco's and meeting his gray eyes. Let me guess, Snape taught that to you. When, though he could not feel his mouth, or any other part of his body, really, he heard his own voice answer, summer before last. How had that happened, he wondered in a panic. Did Potter have some way to make him answer questions despite him not wanting to? Yes, I do, in fact. It's called compulsion charms. The scarred boy grinned nastily as Draco paled. As for how I know what you're thinking right now, that is called legilimency. Mind magic is a useful thing, isn't it? What are we going to do with him? The crazy Lovegood girl asked, looking down at him as if he were nothing more than an interesting bug. I suppose we could just kill him. His eyes widened in fear, and Potter continued, but then we'd have to get rid of the body, and since you murdered Ron just this morning, I'm hesitant to leave yet another corpse laying around. Granger glared at him. He's a genocidal sociopath, has wished me and those like me dead since he was a child, and if we leave him alive, even with erasing his memory of this encounter, he's just going to become a problem again. Killing him now would be doing the world a favor. True, but I think I could come up with a better use for him, nonetheless. How about we let him answer an age-old question for us? Oh, Lovegood prompted. Potter smiled, and if Draco could, he would already be running away from that cruel expression. You see, this is the perfect opportunity to test the effects of nature versus nurture. After all, we know exactly what he turned out to be like after being raised by his parents. Now we have the chance to find out what kind of person he would be without them. I think I see where you're going, Granger allowed tentatively, but wouldn't a true test of nature versus nurture also require de-aging him so that he could actually be raised by someone else? That would work better. Do you have any shrinking solution at the house? When the brunette mudblood shook her head, Potter sighed. Then I guess we're stuck with my original plan. Go ahead and get behind him. We don't want to leave any clues for Dumbledore if he decides to check Malfoy's memories. Though shocked at the scathing tone Potter was using towards his supposed mentor, Draco knew he had to get away from the Scarhead before he did something else to him. He flung his numbed arms ahead of him, idly noting that his severed hand had somehow been reattached without him noticing, and tried to pull himself forward when his hated enemy spoke again. Oh, don't be like that, Malfoy. It will all be fine. I learned this spell from Lockhart, after all. You learned this from who? Finite incantatem. Obliviate. He blinked, staring at the stone floor he was laying on. Why was he laying on the floor? Pushing himself up, he glanced around. Worn tapestries, gray stone as far as the eye could see, a chill draft drifting in from ahead of him. Was he in a castle? Why would he be in a castle? Where was he? And for that matter, who was he? Ginny primped her hair for a moment as she stood outside an otherwise random door in the castle. Harry's note said he wanted to talk with her inside, and there was only one reason for him wanting a private meeting. He had finally figured out that they were meant to be together. Perhaps he was even willing to get rid of Hermione and Luna now, too, but if not, that would not be a deal breaker. She was sure she could convince him to drop them sooner or later. Her adjustments made, she opened the door and stepped inside. Like she had halfway expected, there were the girls who had tried to steal her Harry on a couch, but between them sat her knight in shining armor. He shot her a small smile that made her knees weak and indicated the lone chair in front of the trio. Have a seat, Ginny. We have a few matters we wanted to discuss with you. Okay, she said in a fluster. As soon as she noted her breathy voice, she gave herself a mental slap. She had finally gotten the attention of the boy of her dreams by acting confident and self-assured, and she was not going to risk scaring him off for another couple of years by acting like a ditzy slag. Settling herself in the chair, she asked, "What did you want to talk about?" "Well, we've been talking it over, and we decided to give you an opportunity." Harry waved his hand at the girls beside him. "As you can tell, I'm not entirely adverse to the idea of unusual relationships, and I couldn't help but notice that you still have an enormous crush on me. Did you perhaps want to join our little circle? You want me to be your girlfriend, just as much as Hermione and Luna." She clarified. She had to make sure she understood what was going on. Ginevra Weasley would not play second string to any girl in the quest for Harry's heart. The boy shot her another grin. "Wasn't that what I said?" Standing from the couch, he stepped towards her, but before she could jump up and MC him he had already circled around behind her. However, before we get to the fun stuff, there were a few questions we would really appreciate the answers to. You don't mind telling us that, do you? I guess not, she replied in a nonchalant tone. Anything that got her in a better position to snag her Harry, she was willing to do. Good, Hermione said, smiling sweetly. She continued, did you give Harry, along with the other boys in his dorm, chocolates on Valentine's Day? She nodded. Well, yeah, and did you know that Harry's were spiked with love potion? Yes. As that traitorous admission pet her lips, her eyes grew wide. Why had she admitted that? She tried to stand, reach her wand, anything, but she found that she could not move any part of her body below her neck. Who brewed the potion, and what was the overall plan? Luna asked then, giving her a stern look. Though she tried to keep her mouth shut this time, she found herself saying, Mum made it. She told me it would finally get Harry to notice me, like he should have already. The other candies were so no one would get suspicious. What would you have done once I was drugged up and unable to escape your clutches? Harry asked. He was still behind her, and the paralysis meant she could not turn around and look at his expression, but the tone in which he spoke was angry enough that she did not need to. Once you were mine, I'd make you get rid of Hermione and Luna so we could be together without anyone interfering. Tears streaming from her eyes, she added, I love you, Harry, and I know you love me. I won't let anyone come between us. Luna shook her head in disappointment. Oh, Ginny, you little fool. I'm starting to wonder if you even know what love really is. I think you can guess that we aren't exactly thrilled about what you've done, can't you? At Ginny's hesitant nod, the continued, but good for you, were rather forgiving. You just have to make it up to us. It's a simple thing, really, Hermione said as she picked up a small cup that had been sitting on a table beside her seat. She reached over and wrapped Ginny's slack fingers around the stem. All you have to do is drink this, and all will be forgiven. We'll never mention what you tried to do to anyone. It's a promise. Feeling her control of that arm returning, Ginny looked at the cup fearfully. A rather plain item for all that it was made of gold, only a pair of badger heads decorating the sides. Something about it, or perhaps the pink liquid it held, made her want to fling the goblet down and run out the door. What is it? Oh, just a little potion. It won't harm you. You could even consider it a prank of sorts, Luna responded with a cold grin. Drink up, Ginny, or don't you want us to forgive you? I can deal with a prank. Fred and George play pranks on people all the time. Her hand shaking, she lifted the cup to her lips and drank. The taste was strange, apples and honey and salt all at once, and it only took 2 gulps to empty the whole thing. You know, you should be more excited, Harry said, walking around the chair and plucking the goblet from her fingers. You're probably the first person in 1,000 years to drink from Hufflepuff's enchanted chalice. Extraordinary thing, really. From our research, it seems Helga had it made so that it would enhance any potion placed within it. The longer it was there, the stronger it would get, until eventually some potions could even become permanent. Ginny's eyes bugged out at his comments and the fire she now felt roiling in her belly. What did you do to me? Rather than answer that, let me tell you a quick story, Hermione said with a self-satisfied expression. Long ago, there was a nymph named Echo, who was a favored servant of Artemis, the Greek goddess of the hunt. Echo loved to talk to anyone and everyone, and often Zeus would use her to distract his wife Hera so he could sneak down from Mount Olympus and entertain himself with the women of Earth. Eventually Hera realized what was happening, and in her anger she cursed Echo so that the nymph could no longer speak any words of her own. A light haze encroached over Ginny's sight, and the heat inside her began to spread. She could feel her body shake, and sweat started trickling down her face. Why were they doing this to her? She just wanted Harry to recognize that he loved her. Morose at her loss, Echo wandered the lands, only able to repeat what others had said. One day on her travels, she encountered a young man who was very beautiful to behold. She longed to tell him how she felt, but unless he spoke to her first, she could only follow him in silence. Eventually the man heard the sound of her footsteps, and he called out, "Who's there?" Echo repeated his words, and again he tried, "Why do you run from me?" But again she could only repeat what he had said. One more time he spoke, "Let us meet here together." Overjoyed at his invitation, Echo leapt from the woods to MC him, but as soon as he saw whom he had been talking to, the young man rejected her. Never would she have him or his love, he said before running away. The heartbroken nymph was again alone, and as she grieved she withered away, until eventually all that was left was her voice. Is she planning to talk me to death? She jerked her head, trying to force her body to move, when the shift caused her to glance to the right. Her mouth dropped open as she spotted an absolute angel looking back at her. Artemis was furious at the callousness with which the young man had treated the nymph, and so she cursed him that he might know the same pain he had so casually inflicted. Red hair like flame spilling down her shoulders, soft brown eyes, lots of cute little freckles sprinkled over her cheeks. Ginny licked her lips as she looked the girl up and down. She never thought she would be attracted to other witches, but for this darling, she would gladly make an exception. Not even Harry was as tantalizing and inviting as this vision of beauty. And to make things even better, the other girls seemed just as interested in her. The young man soon came upon a still pool, and as he bent down to take a drink, he gazed upon a handsome man. He reached out to his newfound love, but no matter how he tried, he could not manage to touch him. She tried to move again, to go to the girl she had fallen so hard and so suddenly for, and this time her body responded. Standing from the chair, she wandered over and offered the other witch a sultry smile, which she was happy to see returned. Her hand stretched out, almost as if it had a mind of its own, and pressed gently against the GL separating her from her love. His mind cleared then, and he realized that he had fallen deeply, irrevocably in love with his own reflection in the water. With a cry of anguish, the young man pulled out his knife and stabbed himself in the heart, and he bled out as he looked at himself. Where his blood touched the shore, flowers sprang up, flowers that even today share that young man's name. Narcissus. Ignoring Hermione's babbling, Ginny shot her beloved a heated look and started toying with the buttons of her shirt as she swayed back and forth. The other girl was enraptured with her dance and immediately began to mimic her. I think we'll give you some alone time now, Harry said as he, along with Hermione and Luna, walked to the door. Ginny just waved back absently before she continued her little striptease in front of the mirror. A splash of water woke Dolores from her sleep, and she spluttered and shivered in her thin nightgown. A quick glance around showed her that she had been kidnapped from her soft bed and dragged to the edge of a forest just outside of a little hamlet. What is the meaning of this? She demanded. I am. An enormously irritating, overgrown toad, a metallic voice interrupted. She whipped her head around to find three black-clad figures, only the colors of their vulpine masks let her tell the difference between them. I am truly regretting removing the spells I put on you this past year. I'm sure people would have thanked me for making you croak or leaving you incapable of hearing what people were saying around you. You, she snarled. You were the one responsible for that. I'll have your head. Those spells had been the bane of her existence, and inexplicably they had vanished the very day the students left to ride the Hogwarts Express home 3 weeks ago. Try as she might, Dumbledore had refused to let her hold the little TS back so she could determine who it was who had done it, and with the new minister being no friend of hers and even firing her, she had no weight to bring to bear against the old goat. She had suspected that he had a hand in it, and now with these criminals standing here in front of her, she was more sure of it than ever. No, I don't think you will, replied the person with the yellow mask. If anyone is going to have someone's head, I think we will soon have yours. Dolores balked at that, and the blue-masked individual pointed to something behind her. Ah, and here come the Aurors. Right on time. Is Dawlish one of them? I don't know, the speaker said to the wizard in the red mask. They're too far away. If you're going to attack me, do it now, the squat witch taunted. Once the Aurors spot you, they'll throw you in Azkaban where you belong. Nope, wrong again, the wizard laughed. In fact, they aren't even here for us. They're here for you, because you kidnapped. They don't care about a ministry has been going missing. Maybe if you had kept your job as the minister's senior undersecretary, it would be different, but once Fudge went, you think anyone cared about you? Merlin, they were probably glad to be rid of you once and for all. The red-masked villain shook his head. No, why they're here is actually rather funny. Have you looked at the sky tonight? Dolores glanced up and scowled at the full moon beaming down upon them. You see, Someone sent the DMLE an anonymous tip that there was a werewolf running around town tonight, and it only took them a few minutes to get a couple of people out here. Oh, don't you worry your little head off, he jeered as she shivered in fear. There isn't really a werewolf, but I would feel really bad if they spent their time walking around in the middle of the night with nothing to show for it. They want a werewolf, so we're going to be helpful citizens and give them one, and even better, you get to help. Won't that be fun? What are you talk? Her complaints were cut off when the blue-masked figure blasted her with a spell, and she shrieked as her flesh writhed underneath her skin. After only a few seconds, that human scream morphed into the call of an enormous wolf, and she stumbled as she tried to regain her balance now that her body had been changed into this ungainly form. The kidnappers snickered a moment before fading from sight, and just as she reared back to attack them with the sharp claws they had so generously provided her, a red mist colored her vision. She howled her wrath and her hate for all the world to hear, but then her ears picked up the cracks and thumps of rapidly approaching footsteps. Whirling around, she snarled before charging, planning to tear the red-robed wizards apart in an attempt to soothe her sudden surge of rage. There, Defindo. Dolores had only a moment to curse the two men in her mind before her head slid off her shoulders and tumbled to the ground. Knock, knock, just a minute, Molly called. Then she turned back and placed the bowl of soup on the bedside table. Let me take care of this, and I'll be right back. Mum, please let me go, her baby girl begged, tugging uselessly against the leather strips tying her to the bed. Why are you doing this to me? I love her. Why won't you let me see her? She needs me. Tears pricked at her eyes as she patted Ginny's head. Minerva had Flo called her that dreadful morning a month ago, saying that she had terrible news, and it was only shortly after she arrived at the hospital wing to pick up Ronnie's body that Professor Sprout barged into the hospital wing. She had nearly let the dumpy witch have it before Sprout had dragged her to the room where her darling daughter was holed up, completely and rubbing up against a floor-length mirror like a cat in heat. What am I going to do? She wondered sadly as she tromped down the stairs. 2 of her babies taken from her in a single day, Ron murdered at breakfast without a single witness, because there was just no way he could have really choked on some food, and her daughter obsessed with her own reflection. She knew she could not watch over Ginny in Grimmauld Place, so she had therefore moved her family back to the borough where Ginny could at least be around familiar sights. Her thinking had been that she would not be alone in these trying circumstances, but her hopes were for naught. Fred and George had vanished not a day after returning from Hogwarts, and with Arthur and Bill working all day and Percy still not talking to them, it had been left to her to care for her youngest child. I've tried everything I can think of, but nothing, no spell, no potion, no amount of talking, has gotten through to her. I don't want to take her to St. Mungo's. We don't have the money, and they probably can't help her anyway. Besides, Professor Dumbledore said he would look for a cure, and I'm sure it won't be too much longer before he finds something. Knock, knock, yes, just a minute. Reaching the door, she yanked it open. What, Molly Weasley? The first wizard asked. She nodded and then noticed that they both wore navy robes, the DMLE crest emblazoned on the left side of their S. I'm Investigator Whittaker from the Magical Law Enforcement Patrol, and this is Investigator Adams. The other wizard nodded sharply. May we come in? I'm not letting anyone in until I know what you're doing here. Whittaker nodded. Very well. We recently received a tip that you brewed a love potion and attempted to use it to end the will and mind of one Neville Longbottom. Her eyes widened. Wasn't that the name of one of Ron's housemates? Why would anyone think she would use potions on some boy she had never met? The MLEP wizard's gaze sharpened at her expression, and he continued, Now, we take claims of line theft very seriously. Line theft? I would never do such a thing. She had planned to slip Harry a love potion to make him interested in Ginny, of course, but that wasn't line theft. Everyone knew that boys his age needed a little push to get them to notice girls. Why, Arthur was completely oblivious to me until I used a little potion, and look how happy he is now. But surely that's not a crime. Adams narrowed his eyes and pulled a small, round stone out of his pocket. So for the record, you have never administered a love potion to any pureblood individual with the intent of forcing them into a relationship with someone. Most certainly I haven't. The stone glowed a baleful red at her words, and she did not even have time to slam the door before the wizards cast their spells. She fell heavily to the floor, her legs stuck together and her wand ripped out of her pocket to land in Adams's hand. No, you can't do this to me. I've done nothing wrong. Silencio. Between your words and a lie detection charm, I'll trust the charm, Whitaker snorted. Adams, bag any potion ingredients you find, then we'll take Mrs. Weasley here back to London. Our boss will want to speak to you. Maybe you'll even get really lucky and Madam Bones will want a piece of the action. She hates people who trap others with love potions. No, why are they doing this? Molly thought as she watched the MLEP officer summon all of her ingredients into a sack. The two wizards then levitated her from the floor and led her towards the edges of the burrow's wards. I haven't done anything wrong. It was just a harmless love potion. It's not a big deal. His breath coming in short pants, Albus looked back down the road he had just walked. He could swear that the road had actually lengthened as he traveled, so that what would otherwise have been maybe 100 feet had become a hike of nearly 2 miles. His suspicions were confirmed when his gaze found the hole he had cut in the hedges hiding the property just a short distance away. Not a bad way to deter casual visitors, Tom, I'll grant you that, he admitted as he approached the ramshackle shack. But I am here for a reason, and such a simple trick won't dissuade me. I hope you have something better in store. Reaching out to grab hold of the doorknob of the only door, he hesitated a moment and reached out with his magical sense, honed by decades of practice and being surrounded at all times by highly magical items. Sure enough, there was a compulsion charm laid upon the door, one that would probably cause a would-be intruder to kill himself or something equally nasty. A subtle defense, but one that relied on its victim to be either oblivious or horrendously unskilled. Tom. This was the first Horcrux you truly tried to hide, isn't it? Your inexperience shows. A swirl of his wand then vanished the door. The inside of the Gaunt's house was just as decrepit as the outside, and he transfigured all the waiting vipers into leaves. So far, nothing truly surprising. For better or worse, you were one of the most brilliant students I ever had the fortune of teaching. I expected more out of you. The leader of the light peered about the single room, seeking any spot that stuck out to his senses. The walls were suffused with magic, which was only to be expected, and the next densest concentration of magic was one particular spot on the floor. You truly did make this too easy. Reducto. The wooden floor shattered, revealing a shallow hole, and inside it a simple stone box. Levitating it out of its hiding spot, he swiftly vanished the lid and beheld the second of Tom's Horcruxes. It was a gaudy gold ring, just as Bob Ogden's memory had indicated, and set in the middle was a black stone. Albus's eyes widened as he looked closer. The stone was scuffed, the scratches forming a vertical line inside a circle inside a triangle. The sign of the Deathly Hallows. It can't be. Is this truly the resurrection stone? His hand shook as he reached out and plucked the ring from the box. Taking a deep breath, he slid it onto the fourth finger of his right hand. Just 3 turns to see Arian. Og. It had been a trap. He collapsed to the ground, his hand on fire even as he watched pitch-black lines following the veins of his hand and arms. He likely had only minutes to get help, a bazaar or one of Horace's broad-spectrum antidotes or something. Finite incantatum. The walls of the shack rippled and twisted for a moment before disappearing entirely, and he stared in disbelief as the house he thought he had entered turned out to be nothing more than a flat stretch of ground and a freestanding doorframe. It was all a setup. Slow, mocking clapping dragged his attention to his audience, and he gasped at who it was. No, Harry. The boy was supposed to be at Grimmauld Place with Sirius and the rest of the Order. Dumbledore had planned to speak with him the next day about the letter he sent Minerva regarding his withdrawal from Hogwarts. What was Harry doing here? Yep. The young man smiled down at his elder, similar expressions worn by the 2 girls standing at his sides. I have to say, I didn't expect that you'd fall for our trap quite that easily. I was prepared to have to fight you in an epic duel with grand speeches and posturing. And that ultimately ended up with Luna or me cursing him in the back while his attention was focused on you. Harry blushed at Hermione's dry tone. Something like that, yeah. Looks like Dumbledore isn't the only prideful one around here, the Lovegood girl observed. And speaking of pride, Accio Elder Wand. Before he could tighten his grip on the first Hallow to come into his possession, the spell had it soaring out of his hand to smack loudly in her palm, and he shuddered in sudden fear. For 50 years he had possessed the most powerful wand ever created, but now he had been disarmed, and he could almost feel his mastery over it slip away. Even more troubling was that she realized what it was. He had thought the identity of his wand had been safe with him. "How long have you known?" he asked desperately. "That you were the master of the Elder Wand, or that you were also after the Deathly Hallows?" The girl, Luna, he recalled, asked. "Though I suppose it doesn't really matter, considering the answer is the same." A while, several clues clicked into place. "Your father. He's a quester, too." "That he is, and he'll be so happy to hear that one family now possesses all of them." "What?" He glanced over the three in confusion. Harry, of course, pointed to the cloak of invisibility DD carelessly over his shoulder, but the real surprise was when Hermione fished a golden locket out from under her blouse and opened it to reveal a round, black stone. His eyes drifted down to the ring on his finger. "But this, a very convincing fake. I spent all yesterday making it look exactly right," Harry boasted. A sharp jab of pain in his shoulder reminded Albus that he was racing against the clock, and he gave a mental call to Fawkes. The phoenix appeared in a flash of flame above him, but rather than swoop down to grab him, the firebird looked about in confusion. Chuckling slightly, Harry tossed over a ripe plum. Fawkes caught the fruit with a joyful trill and vanished once again. "Fawkes, have you, too, abandoned me?" Harry turned to a smirking Luna. "All right, I'll say it. I was wrong, and you were right. I never should have doubted that your Phoenix-specific Confundus charm would work exactly as advertised." "At least you're admitting the awesomeness of my plan," she said with a grin. Her smile faded after a moment, and she added, "Then again, Fawkes seemed a little too lucid at the end there. He might have just decided that it was time for him to move on and look for another wizard to follow. There's no way to tell, and it's not like we'll be able to find him again once Dumbledore kicks the bucket." "I'd give him 30 more seconds, 45 at most," Hermione announced. "Harry, listen to me," Albus panted, the curse on the ring making his lungs feel like they were dissolving in his. For all he knew, that was exactly what was happening. Voldemort left pieces of his soul scattered about Britain, 6 of them in total, blah blah blah, the boy cut in. "Yeah, we already know. The Horcruxes are all destroyed, the Death Eaters who weren't arrested are dead, and we personally chucked old Tommy Boy through the veil. The war's over." Albus gasped in disbelief. How does he know all this? Then he realized what the second half of Harry's statement was. "You what?" "No, Harry, you were supposed to redeem Voldemort, not kill him. Our world needs a strong—" A coughing fit interrupted him, and when he pulled his hand back, it was covered in blood and what looked like tar. "A strong leader once I'm gone. And there's one more Horcrux. Your scar. You were a Horcrux, too, my boy." "Oh, Dumbledore, you old idiot," Harry replied with a mocking laugh. "When I said all the Horcruxes, I meant it. My scar's been taken care of for over a year now. As for redeeming Voldemort of all people, I only give second chances to those who deserve them. He most certainly is not one of them." "Then you truly have gone dark," he whispered sadly. If Harry could no longer find forgiveness in his heart and Voldemort was no longer around to put him down, the world was lost. "May I make one last request?" "No." He gaped at the audacity of the boy in front of him even as the vice grip around his tightened. "You would not even do something for me, in my last moments?" Harry laughed darkly, his grin more of a vicious snarl. "You set my parents up to be murdered. You knowing left me with abusive relatives. You used me as bait to lure Voldemort to Hogwarts, not once but twice. You dosed Hermione with a love potion in an attempt to regain control of me. And you just tried to make me kill myself because I rejected your stupid plan." The boy took a few steps closer and growled, "I wouldn't piss on you if you were on fire." "Please," he gasped, his heart thudding painfully in his. "At least take my remains back to the castle." A shake of Harry's head was all his plea earned. "Nope, can't do that. I'm not going to make you a martyr. You'll simply disappear, and from there, you'll fade from memory. No grand funeral, no shining white tomb. Just a pitiful death in a forest and your body vanished to who knows where." Ba dump, ba dump, ba. As darkness encroached on his sight, he had time for one last question. "Why?" Because no one mourns the wicked. Waves lapped at Harry's toes as he refolded the letter in his hands. He grinned and muttered, which would be better? Letting them bumble about all on their own, or helping them? Decisions. Uh-oh. You using that tone is never a good sign. He turned his eyes to the coming his way and allowed himself a moment to simply enjoy the view. Even after giving birth to 3 children, Luna loved proving that she could still rock that skimpy blue bikini, and neither he nor Hermione would dare try convincing her otherwise. Offering him one of the fruity drinks in her hands, she asked, "Who's that from, and why are you plotting to ember them?" Tonks sent it. She wanted to know if we would mind her and Teddy visiting for a week or so. Considering how he and Helen look at each other, Luna nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. The only ones who didn't see the crushes Tonks's only child and his and Hermione's eldest were nursing for each other were the kids in question. And I wasn't going to ember them, necessarily, but Merlin, they need help. Well, she is your daughter. She comes by it honestly. He sighed and nodded at that jab. Much to Luna's amusement, Helen could be said to be a perfect mix of Hermione and him. She had her mother's ins and obsessive need for organization, his eyes and penchant for being found by trouble, and the worst head of hair the world had ever seen. Thankfully for the trio, none of her siblings, full or half, brought nearly so much drama to their lives as his. 15-year-old, and come to think of it, you're the closest thing Teddy has to a father figure since Tonks never married her mysterious baby daddy, so you are partially to blame for his obliviousness, too. Hardy har har, I guess it's a good thing Mark takes after you, then, or I'd have drawn the line at 2. And as Tonks wanting to bring sweet little Drocky with her, she continued in a sugary voice. Don't even go there, Harry answered with a shudder. I know he's been a whole different person ever since the Tonkses took him in after we erased his memory, but having what looks like a younger Lucius be nice to us is just too weird for me. She snickered and sat down on the sand beside him. Staring over the water surrounding their home in the British Islands, she sighed and said, hard to believe sometimes that it's already been 20 years, isn't it? That it is, he agreed. And you know what? I still don't regret coming back in the slightest. Luna clinked her GL against his. Neither do I. They sat in silence for a moment, just watching the waves, before she spoke again. I'm thinking about writing a book. Oh, about us and our adventures. He blinked once, twice, but unfortunately it still did not make sense. Sweetie, are you sure that's a good idea? I mean, the Argentinian ministry still has a kill-on-sight order out on us, and I don't think the Saudis would exactly pee up an opportunity to get even for that job we pulled for the Swiss dwarves. Oh, it wouldn't be anything that incriminating. Just what we did during our first year back. So just 30-some counts of breaking and entering, the same for larceny, and a few murder charges thrown in for flavor. Yes, that's much better. She scoffed at his comment. Besides, I wasn't going to publish it in the wizarding world, anyway. The Muggles have a thriving market for fantasy literature. Still might be a good idea to publish it anonymously, he muttered. Fine, I'll give it some more thought. Oh, you missed it today since you had that staff meeting, but Neville sent us an owl. Apparently he's taking a year's sabbatical to travel the world and give a series of lectures about his research. You mean his experiments with cross-breeding devil's snare and puffapods? I guess herbology professors have an easier time with research, he said with a chuckle. Just stick it in the dirt and leave it alone. Luna rolled her eyes. Jealousy doesn't become you, Harry. Years ago, the 3 of them had a hearty laugh when Neville, who, along with most of the new DA, had exchanged the occasional letter with them over the years, had sent a letter announcing that he had been chosen as Sprout's successor at Hogwarts. Who could have predicted that both of Trelawney's potential chosen ones would go on to teach the next generation? A year later, Harry had been forced to turn down McGonagall's offer to take over Flitwick's place after the Quarter Goblin's retirement. One of the best aspects about teaching charms at Tortola Magical Academy, and a big reason they had made their home in the islands, was that it was a day school, which allowed him and his kids to come home at the end of each day. There would be no spending 10 months away from their family in a drafty old castle for the 5 youngest Potters. Let me guess, you want to attend his talk? Harry asked in a knowing voice. Of course, I don't care about the plants, necessarily, but it would be good to see him again. The hospital's already scheduled Myone for a couple of days off, too, so we could all go and maybe invite him and Hannah to stay for dinner. It would be nice to see him again, he admitted. Though they had kept in touch with their students from the DA. Only Astoria had regular contact with them, being an widely renowned warding and home security consultant, a lingering result of their raid on her parents' house decades earlier. She could come enjoy the Caribbean sun basically any time she wanted to. They could not count the number of times she had spent between a few days to a week borrowing their guest room and basically just lounging around. Colin was now a big-shot journalist for the Daily Prophet and spent quite a bit of time mingling with Susan, who rather than go into law enforcement like her aunt had instead carved out a place for herself in the Department of International Magical Cooperation. The trio suspected that their relationship was not strictly business in nature. Ernie, however, made the most surprising decision by making his way into the Muggle world and setting himself up as a professional investor. Apparently he actually had a touch of the sight, which he freely used to guide his trading and rake in money by the barrow load. Letting him handle their own investments, for an appropriate fee, of course, was probably the best financial decision they had ever made. See, even you like this plan. He's giving a talk in 3 weeks, so, she cut herself off when a loud pop preceded a house elf appearing in front of them. Dobby, we weren't expecting you back for another few days. The only slightly older-looking elf gave her a wide smile. Dobby knows, but Dobby knows Master and Mistresses would wants to know that the bad Russian minister's advisor and advisor's wife left their house. Dobby followed them and heard they be's going on vacation now. Excellent, Harry said with a grin. You have the notes. Dobby shoved the sheaf of mixed parchment and paper depicting the house's defenses into his hands, and he could not help but turn his mind to the 3 well-cared-for bodysuits behind a false back in their closet. Thanks to his and Hermione's jobs, his inheritance, and the interest off their earlier ill-gotten gains, they did not need or even want the extra money. This was purely to weaken the blood purity cause around the globe, and if those people's sizable fortunes then found their ways to orphanages and soup kitchens and charities. Well, who would really hold that against them? Other than the people they robbed, obviously. Should I tell the kids that Grandpappy Sirius will be responsible for them tonight? Luna asked facetiously. You mean tell Helen and Mark that they'll be in charge of 3 kids and an overgrown man-child? He shot back with a grin. Once the Death Eaters were taken care of, Sirius had communicated with Madame Bones through Tonks to get an official pardon, though he had eventually decided to hang around Jake and Miranda while the trio were doing their self-study, rather than get a real job, and even came with them to the islands when they moved. Late one night, and having drunk not a few beers beforehand, he had explained to Harry that after missing 14 years with his godson, he was not going to chance it again. Might as well. You know, I keep expecting them to confront us one of these days about just where we run off to late at night without warning. She laughed. Oh, Myone and I already took care of that. Gave them a few details about what goes on in swinger clubs, and strangely enough, they never asked again. He gaped for a moment before laughing heartily. If traumatizing his children alongside the loves of his life wasn't the greatest reward of a life well lived, he didn't know what was. End. I hope you enjoyed this story. Also remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.